Welcome to the Confidence in Singing podcast, where you can reclaim your voice and rediscover the joy of singing. I'm Aideen, and my guests include singers and voice experts who share their insights and journey to encourage singing for health, happiness, and fun. To support this podcast and join the Confidence in Singing community, just click on the Patreon link below. Welcome everyone, this is Aideen from Confidence in Singing, and today my guest is Brigitte Beraha. Thank you for joining us, Brigitte.
Thanks for having me.
It's absolutely a delight to have you joining us because I've known you for many, many years. I've followed some of your music, and you've been my teacher as well when I was studying jazz music. So I'm really excited to introduce you to everyone. I'm going to read out a little bit of your bio now, so to kind of fill in the gaps and let everyone know what you do. So, Brigitte Beraha is an improvising vocalist and composer and a leading talent on the UK jazz scene. Embracing a wide variety of influences and genres, Brigitte's sound is free and spontaneous, with an emphasis on exploration, expression, and fearlessly testing the limits of the voice as an instrument. Also a top-class educator, Brigitte found an affinity for teaching during her studies in London and now teaches jazz vocals at Guildhall School of Music, Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and the Royal Welsh College of Music. She also runs her own masterclasses. Brigitte has recorded a number of critically acclaimed albums, both as a leader and part of collaborative projects such as Babelfish, Solstice and Red Skies Trio. And we'll talk a little bit more about your more recent albums towards the end of the podcast. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to have a lovely chat.
Yeah.
What I was wondering about, I suppose, is where you started with your singing. What led you to jazz music? Because I know you're not originally from London, correct?
That's right. Yes, it's kind of a little complicated, I suppose. I was born in Italy, and my dad's Turkish, my mum's half Turkish, half English, but we moved to the south of France when I was quite young, and so I grew up in the south of France, basically. And in terms of the singing, where when it first started, it's actually started, well, forever, I suppose. But in terms of being able to, we were talking about that before, about calling myself a singer, not till very, very late. But I was always really, really drawn to singing, like I think most human beings, really. Singing away, and I played the piano very, very when I was about 11. My dad. See, if I go back, my dad used to be the piano player for a famous Turkish pop star in the 60s, late 60s.
Wow!
And so I grew up. Yeah, so I grew up hearing him just play the piano for fun and singing with his quite raucous voice, let's say. And so I was really drawn to that. And then I didn't have piano lessons till I was maybe 12 or something, 11, 12. But before that, I was always going to the piano and just messing around and singing, the Beatles and Dire Straits and Elton John. I was a big fan of. And it wasn't until I actually moved to London to, at the time, what I thought was going to be to do theatre studies in my 20s, but then ended up doing music for one reason or another. It was all kind of chance stuff as a piano player. And then I was in the choir, and then people seemed to be more impressed about my singing than they were about my piano playing. So I just kind of moved to singing as I was studying. I was studying at Goldsmiths College, an undergraduate's music, contemporary music, classical and contemporary music as a piano player, and then switched to singing in my second year. So, and I was in my 20s at that point. So I'm basically very new to singing as thinking about it professionally was very late. Yeah.
Wow, it's so interesting to hear that. I didn't really know that full story. And your dad basically played for a Turkish pop star. That's fascinating.
He did. He did. He gave it up in his early 20s, and then went on to doing other things. But yeah. So he was he's a musician at heart, really, even though he doesn't play anymore. But that was where I think I got my first love of music from, was just seeing him having fun playing the piano and singing, and I was like, oh, I want to do the same. But it was always, at that point, he was just doing it for fun. So I just thought that that's what you do. You just do it for fun, which is a great way to think about it anyway. But I never thought that was something that one could envisage of doing professionally, really. That never crossed my mind till way later.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you took that step to go to London. Was that what gave you the confidence to decide to move to England to study?
Yeah, so I was actually studying. I was in Nice, in the south of France, studying law. I was in my first year of law degree. It's just, I suppose, what we're saying earlier is just that I thought that's the kind of thing, I suppose, from my education that just have to be a doctor or have to be a lawyer, and I thought that was something that I was also attracted to, but I understood very, very soon in that first year that, hang on a minute, this isn't for me, really. And growing up, I was passionate with performing on stage but more drama, theatre. Okay. I was doing quite a lot of that as a teenager, and so I thought, my brother was already in London and my mum was already in the UK, so I just fancied a change, really. I just wanted to see what the world was like outside of my little bubble, and it was either, I wanted to go to a bigger city, somewhere that would be more anonymous, because everyone knew each other where I was. It was kind of quite villagey like, which is great, but yeah. So I thought either Paris or London, and I thought, actually, you know what, I just wanted something completely, a big drastic change, and that's, I don't know why I decided it, but it just, it just clicked. Happened, and so it clicked, and so I just came to London, and the first 6 months, I'd say, were really, really tricky in terms of readjusting and learning to meet people. It takes ages to kind of get the confidence to get to know people, and so it was very slow start, but after 6 months I settled in, and I'm still in London now, so yeah, it's my home now. Yeah,
that's
love it.
Wonderful. I'm curious to ask you a little bit about the stagecraft that you would have learned in acting in your teens, and obviously you were very interested in studying that as well, so you spent some time studying it. How has that lent itself to your music and performance?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, for sure. I think I was always been quite shy as a kid, and even now. So the performing side of thing was a way of expressing myself in a way that felt quite safe, because it was just learning some, sorry, my phone was ringing there. Learning some poems by heart, and loving to sort of express, reading books out loud. So learning about that kind of stagecraft on the stage, where I'm impersonating someone, but sort of feeling through someone else's story, and expressing myself through that. I think that was definitely a step towards performing the music that I perform now, which feels more honest, if you like, more intimate, because I'm not singing jazz is more about sort of expressing myself as
a personal, isn't it, as well? Because you're writing your own. I am.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah, and it's not always autobiographical by any means, but it's a different. You're channeling a different energy, I suppose. But but certainly doing the theatre side of things has helped me get to where I am now. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Wonderful. And one thing that I've noticed with a lot of my students, a lot of my listeners are people who really love singing, but maybe haven't had that education, or maybe wanting to transition into doing it more, either as a hobby or even professionally. And many non-singers or beginner singers underestimate the amount of time it takes to actually learn a song very well. And when you mentioned reading out poetry, or like learning poetry and learning like for acting, learning lines and things like that, I'd be interested to hear your take on this, because in my experience, people think that they're just going to remember the song, you know, and they often can remember a verse and fall flat. And so actually figuring out and listening and understanding a song and getting deeper into the song is actually something that I recommend. What would you say to someone in that position?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting one, because I think as I got used to learning lyrics very quickly because of what I just talked about in terms of memorizing things and reading things out loud. When I went into singing, learning songs, I think I had that experience behind me where I didn't necessarily connect to the lyrics that much, but I we're all different, so I think I had a bit of a facility there where I was able to learn lyrics very quickly because because my memory was quite strong in that respect, without necessarily connecting to the lyrics themselves, because I was more drawn to the music beforehand. But I know that not everyone is like that. And now things have changed. Now I connect with the lyrics so much more than I used to. And some of my students who, for example, don't have that, we all have different experiences. It's, I think, really important to kind of think about connect what is the lyric actually about. So sometimes I would, one of the exercises would be to write down the lyrics separately from the music, actually to go through that physical thing of writing the lyrics down. So you're actually reading them, seeing them as you are writing them down, and then speaking them as you might a poem or as you might an actor, and getting inside the meaning of the song, understanding what do those lyrics say to you, how do they speak to you. And by having that connection, then we're more likely to feel them, and therefore to remember them as well.
That's beautiful. And that's, such a great suggestion, and I really love that. And yes, everybody hears different things in a song, don't they? Like some people, like you said there initially, you kind of loved the music and the whatever you were hearing beyond the lyrics. And I've noticed that if I get a guitarist coming to me for singing, that I have to draw their attention to something to do with the lyrics or something to do with the melody, because they're so used to tuning into the rhythm of the song and the harmony behind the song. For jazz music, I know it's particularly important to pay attention like that in order to improvise. And I know for when I first started studying jazz music, I was like, oh my goodness, how does anybody improvise? How can they play a song and then just know what notes go with that song? Would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about the magic behind it, like how that actually comes about?
Yeah, there's so many different ways of doing it, really. If you're connecting it to the you can improvise, but just around the lyric. That's one way of doing it, even before you think about the harmony and the melody, although and the rhythm. Although that can all come hand in hand. But if you just say, if we continue with the lyric and just take the lyric and look at it at its natural rhythm when you're looking at a phrase, so you could experiment with taking this lyrics that you're looking at, and then taking away the melody or the rhythm that is written on the page, and then seeing where the natural flow lies, and just improvise with those lyrics. There's so much that you can that you will be able to achieve with that. So for example, if I say, for example, ba-da-da-da, you just you've got the natural flow of the lyric in there, and it's really interesting when I speak to instrumentalists. Some instrumentalists actually know the lyrics to songs, to jazz standards as well, because it makes them improvise in a different way. But what if we take the lyric away and just look for a second at the more looking at it in a musical perspective without the lyrics, then you can. There's so many different ways of doing it. I mean, this is basically like you've spent years.
Imagine you're talking to someone who has never done this before. Okay, so basic level.
So you might. So what I would say, you can do is, if you can read music, for example, and you see that a jazz standard, say Summertime, written on the page, and see how that might be written on the page, and then compare it to what someone like Sarah Vaughan or someone like Ella Fitzgerald, how do they interpret that, either with lyrics or without lyrics, then you will see that they're going to change. They might change the melody a bit. They might change the phrasing a bit. So for example, if you're here to summertime and the living is easy, they might go summertime and the living is easy. I haven't changed much, but I've changed something, right? Yes. And that means that I'm already improvising there. So that's just me for changing the phrasing around a little bit. I've changed one note maybe here and there, but that's already making it a little bit different. And then if I look at it harmonically, then you can also look at choosing notes that are going to fit in the chords the chords of Summertime, rather than thinking about the melody of Summertime.
Yes, and that's another level. Yeah, we might not go into that too deeply today. I remember being so confused. I mean, it's because when you're a beginner going into that, it feels like you're completely just guessing. And I realized that for a lot of singers, when they start off and if I say, okay, and I say, okay, copy that sound, they're like, that's the basic level. They can't copy it because they might have never actually made that note before. And I always say that it's a bit like guessing. And in improvising, that's how I felt when I started. It was like I was guessing all the time, and it didn't really feel safe for me to do that.
Sure, yeah, I think that, and that's why, if you're learning a language, if you're learning the English language for the first time, you can't just learn it out of thin air, right? You start by copying. You start by copying syllables. You start by copying words, and it's the same thing, with something that's new, with improvising. So when we first learn about improvising, we're going to be listening loads to records, listening to how it's done, and copy. Is the first thing, is to copy, to understand what the language is, to get familiar with the language itself, and that gives us then the confidence to then do it ourselves, and then start doing variations of that idea, or and the more we get into that, the more we start understanding what it is. I mean, when I first, or anyone who first hears the improvisation might not even realize that what people are doing is improvised, or how much is it improvised? It comes from history, and you might when I say I'm improvising, am I actually really improvising? I'm probably using some of the things that I've worked on before and then doing variations of that, So it's these things take time, but it's always, I would say, the first thing is really listening to it, getting into it, imitating, copying, and then we can start transforming, and that's how we get the confidence to do it. Yeah,
that's wonderful. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your journey with songwriting as well? Because sometimes, I mean, I've had a few beginner singers that within 2 or 3 weeks of taking singing lessons, they'll decide, okay, I'm going to start guitar now. And then a week or two later, they're like, oh, I'm going to write a song now. But for many people, that is another phase of having confidence in yourself. Did songwriting come easy to you, or?
No, not at all. I mean, I remember the first time I actually wrote something was for one of my friends' birthday, when I'm going back to when we were like 12 years old or something, and I didn't know how to write music. I'd never done it before, and I don't think it sounded very good, but it was like maybe 4 bars of something, and I tried to write it with all my limited skills, and I think I wrote it completely wrong. But it was, I think it's just doing it, basically, is what I'm trying to say. It's just, it doesn't matter where we are in our, in our journey, and it's being kind to ourselves and seeing, what limitations have I got at the moment? What do I know? And then working with those. So there's loads of different ways of going about songwriting, but I think you can start with. So that was where I started, but then I didn't do it again for like 15 years, So so the process can all be very different depending on what your musical knowledge is as well. But there's so many different ways of doing it. It can be about thinking, who is my favorite, if I want to songwrite, who do I love? And then listening to a song of theirs, and then seeing, sort of analyzing, what are they doing, lyrically, first of all, if you're going to be writing with lyrics, how do they construct their lyrics? Is it really matter of fact? Is it poetic? Is it just to understand where these songwriters are coming from, and then again getting that starting point of copying a little bit the what they're doing. If there's like a very clear bass riff, oh, maybe I can start with that. Start with a very clear bass riff, or no, I'm going to write the lyric first. And then, if it feels like it's quite poetic, one thing that you could do, for example, which I've done recently, and I love doing that, is reading poetry and then taking one phrase from here and one phrase from there and just writing it all down. And then just that one starting phrase can then get
Trigger.
you to write a trigger in a certain direction. And then from there, once I've got this lyric, I might then think of a melody. I record everything as well. It's really easy now on my phone, just so that I don't throw anything away. Even if sometimes I think, oh no, this doesn't sound very good. That's okay. I'm not going to throw anything away, because I might come back to it the next day and then think, oh no, actually, this was quite nice. Or 2 months later, you come back to it and go, no, but that actually is relevant now for this song that I'm writing now. That will work really well. I mean, I know I'm going from one place to another, because there are so many different ways of doing it, and none of it is necessary is wrong. We've all got certain ways of working, and I like having my starting points coming from different places, so that then I know that the less likely for the same thing to repeat itself, if that makes
Lovely.
sense. So start with a riff, or start with a chord. Okay, if you don't know how to play the piano, you could or the guitar, you don't have to know necessarily what it is. Just play it, and you like the sound of it. You've recorded it, and then you could have collaborations as well. You might have some musician friends that can then transcribe some of the stuff that you've just done by ear, or you might have the lyric and collaborate with them, writing the music for you. Depending on where you are in your journey. But don't let your limitations stop you from giving it a go.
That's beautiful. And you did say there about being kind, because it's like yes, you almost need to go, I'm going to try this, even though I don't know how to play music, or
Mm,
even though I've never written a song before, even though I'm not sure that sounds
mm,
good,
mm.
but to kind of stick with it. And would you put aside a time that you would spend like songwrite? Like, would you say to yourself, okay, Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m., I'm going to sit down and write songs, or I'm going to play with my music?
Yeah, I try to definitely. It depends, sometimes it just an idea comes and then you just have to sort of drop everything and just do it
Yeah.
wherever you are. But certainly regularity does help to make things easier and quicker. So if I can, I try to have a schedule where I will just be working on songwriting or on composition. And I do know that the more I do it, the easier it gets because you're in the flow for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful. Um, what would you say the benefits for you of singing are, and music? I mean, even from, mental health, and
Mm.
there's a lot of kind of hidden benefits that people might not acknowledge immediately. What have you noticed?
Oh, definitely. Well, I've noticed so much really in terms of yeah, in terms of well-being, in terms of confidence. It's just it has been proven, hasn't it, that just singing just makes you feel better, just generally. That it's whether you're doing it in a choir or whether you're doing it with friends or a band, or whether you're doing it on your own. That is sort of such a good way of release, and it's such a great way of expression. I know that for me it certainly is. I did notice that when especially during the lockdown, when I stopped performing, certainly, that I felt that there was so much more tension in me, and the performance outlet and playing with others and sharing this music, music. I say playing, singing, and sharing this musical experience is very joyful. It's a very joyful thing. So not having it in my life is it just doesn't feel right. Yeah, I'd say, if you're new to singing, it would be really worth giving it a go. Even with backing tracks, these days, you can get backing tracks to start with, and just doing it, without worrying, oh, am I in tune? Am I just do it and see how it makes you feel, And then, of course, if you want to learn more about singing and be guided by a singing teacher or vocal coach such as yourself, then to give you a little bit of guidance as to how to go about it. So then that's the next step. But yeah, it just feels great. Singing feels great. Just
Oh
does.
yes, and I've seen you perform, and it is a joyful experience when I see you
Oh, thank
perform.
you
I
so
see that
much.
joy, I really do. Um, and
And it's also I've noticed for myself, if whenever I've had sad times in my life, or for example, my grandmother passing away a couple of last year. Just it's life, but it's also such a sad moment. But then, triggers this. Oh, I wrote a song, and then I sung it, and then that's such uh, a statement for her, but also a release for me, And it's just yeah, it's a very strange but beautiful thing that's singing is a very personal thing as well, I think, because the vocal cords are inside your body and you just really feel it resonant in your body. So it's a very therapeutic thing for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. And I was listening to um, a lady talking about creativity and how important stories are to humans in general. How
Mm.
we create meaning in our lives,
Mm.
and that helps
Mm.
us to navigate the emotions of the world and life, and how important art
Mm.
and whether it's music or, painting, how those things actually help us to express what's going on in our heads and the meanings that we're giving things. And it is a lot more therapeutic than our kind of critical mind can fathom.
Completely therapeutic for ourselves and therapeutic for others as well sometimes, which is such a nice feeling as well, that you're not just, well, you can just do it for yourself 100%, but also sometimes to know that it helps others as well in one tiny little way. It's really nice.
That's beautiful. I remember before I kind of started studying singing formally. Well, I had taken lessons, but before I kind of took the leap to do it full time, in kind of doing college course, I'd been at a karaoke bar and I sang a song called "Papa, Can You Hear Me?" It's Barbra Streisand from Yentl.
Yeah.
And a friend came up at the end and said, "There's a lady over there crying," because it's about your father, kind of longing for your father. And I was like, oh, geez, is that a good or bad thing? But we can be surprised how, just being in the moment and being in the emotion of a song and having it mean something to you can trigger that an emotional shift for someone else who may have experienced something similar.
Completely, yeah. That's really precious. Yeah,
it is. And before, I want to talk a little bit about your albums and the song that you've picked to share with us today. But I am curious. I had one more little question. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by emotion when you sing? And if so, what do you do to help that? Because that can happen sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I think. I suppose with experience you sort of learn to get to the point where, especially when you're on stage in front of others. And I mean, I've seen professional performers who just cry on stage sometimes, but I don't think I've ever done that. I think you just sort of always sort of learn to get to the point where you don't allow yourself somehow to kind of go there, even though you're very close. But I would say, if you're practicing, if you're singing on your own and a tear or two happens, let it. Why not? There's nothing wrong in crying, but in fact, I'm not qualified to talk about these things, but from personal experience anyway, if I'm at home and then you sort of you're letting yourself go 100%, and then you end up crying, what a lovely release, actually. Yes. But then as a performer performing on stage to your audience, you don't want to get to the point where your audience is going to maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable if
Yeah, so or start handing you tissues.
Exactly. So then I think that's just experience, isn't it? Of sort of knowing, allowing yourself to know that if it happens, it happens. But your audience is there with you anyway. We're in all of this together. But usually, when you go on stage, there is always that thing where you go, okay, well, now I'm still performing. So there's still this bit in you that's kind of stopping you from going across. Even though you want to be honest and deliver a really powerful and emotive performance, if it's appropriate for the song that you're singing.
It's an interesting one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's almost, I feel like you need to have grasped some understanding of that emotion and conquered it in some way within yourself, that you kind of, I'm able to feel this pain because I've kind of worked through it somehow within myself, and now I can sing it. Exactly.
If it's too painful, then maybe don't do it yet. In front of an audience. Yeah. If it's too raw for one reason or another, and okay, every time I sing this song at the moment, I burst out crying. It's just okay. Well, maybe that's a little bit too raw. That's a little bit too much to put yourself through that. If you're standing in front of others. again, be kind to yourself and choose material that you know is not going to be so painful in a way. You know, you don't want to get into a situation where maybe you might feel, you know, never should, but you know, we're humans, embarrassment or whatever. Oh my goodness, you know. So it's just also protecting ourselves a little bit in one way or in one way, isn't it? Yeah.
Wonderful.
Just not being completely bare.
Yeah. A little boundary between you and the emotions and the audience.
Well, yeah, it depends what you have to know, what your boundaries are, and there are some performers out there that might not want any boundaries, and that's also absolutely fine, you know. Yes. You just have is knowing what your own boundaries are and what you where you allow yourself to go or not, so that then you feel confident on stage at that point. Yeah,
beautiful.
With what you're delivering. Yeah.
Let's tell everybody a little bit about how they can find out more about your music and connect with you. I know you mentioned your Lucid Dreams is your most recent album, correct?
Yeah, Lucid Dreamers. Yeah, that's right. This is a new band with a quartet. So Lucid Dreamers is with electronics. It's a little bit more sort of not, I don't know if it's jazz really. It's jazzy with electronic music, ambient music. We released an album in July 2020. And then there's another one coming up soon. But you can find all of the information on my website, which is BrigitteBeraha.com, where you will see gigs, online gigs or gigs, real gigs. Real gigs, should I say, in front of an audience, and then workshops and things like that, if anyone's interested. Yeah,
absolutely. So everybody head over to BrigitteBeraha.com and sign up for the newsletter and stay in touch with Brigitte. The song that you've picked to share with us today, The Man Who Cycled from India for Love. Can you tell us a little bit about that song? And because I know this is a song that you do improvise on, and not everybody's maybe familiar with, you know, or understands what you're doing there. Tell us a little bit about that song and what it means to you.
Yeah. Okay. So this is from an album called The Way Home, which is a duo album that I did with Frank Harrison. If you want to know more, I should say maybe also go on my Bandcamp page, where you will find maybe more of those albums on there. But that was the Man Who Cycled from India. So he wrote the music first, Frank Harrison, who's an amazing piano player. And he asked me to write some lyrics. And it so happened at the time that I stumbled upon this article, which is about this Indian man who in the 70s lived in India. And he was from, you know, there are castes in India, and from the lower caste. And so he was, to earn money, he was painting tourists. And he had, when he was born, he was given this, he was told that the stars told him that he was going to get married to this very alien woman. And so he didn't quite understand what that meant. Anyway, he saw this blonde woman with blue eyes who came to him to ask him to paint a portrait of her, and he fell in love. She fell in love with him, but she had to go back to Sweden, is where she came from, and so he was very saddened by that, and but then he didn't take no for an answer. He decided that he was going to, with the little money that he had, that he was going to buy a bicycle. Second-hand bike, and so he cycled all the way from India to find her in Sweden, and they got married. And so I was inspired by that story, which I thought was, oh my goodness, it's amazing. And so I wrote the lyrics to that, and I actually found him on Facebook, so I sent him the tune that we'd recorded, thinking nothing, you know, he wouldn't get back. And so he got back saying, we absolutely love it. And so they said, oh, you have to meet our son who lives in London. And so I met him, and to cut a long story short, they came to our album launch. so not by bicycle, and so we met the whole family, almost all of the family, and they're absolutely beautiful people. They wrote a book on the amazing story, actually, which I'm sure will become a film at some point. But this was a long,
oh no, but it's so interesting. I love it.
But in terms of the improvising, so you will hear me singing the lyrics on this melody that Frank wrote, and then at some point I come out of the lyrics and I start improvising wordlessly. So in this case, I think it was very much my idea of improvising was very much so the chords stay the same, so we go around the same chords. But even though I'm singing without words, in my mind I'm still singing with the feeling of what the song is about. So hopefully that comes across, and then the melody is improvised, basically. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness, that's such a fascinating story. We definitely want to find out more about that man
Please do.
cycled from India.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting you mentioned the astrology side, because one of the ladies that I've interviewed for this podcast is my meditation teacher, Kaloda, who is a Vedic astrologer. And so she doesn't talk a lot about that in it. But in India, that is much more respected, astrology, as a form of almost coaching or mentoring, that people would look at what was happening. And I have an interest in that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well, this is very much that. It's fascinating that their story. It's just it was all written in the stars for him. He has no doubt about that.
In that end, knowing that gave him probably a little bit more confidence to.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really, really fascinating. Oh my goodness, I could talk to you for another hour about that just on itself. So we're going to round everything up now, and I'm going to play your song, "The Man Who Cycled from India for Love." Is there anything else that you wanted to say to our listeners before we finish?
Just please enjoy, because it's all about singing, isn't it? And if anyone's ever told you that you couldn't sing or anything like that, just forget about that and just enjoy the process, enjoy singing. It's such a lovely release and such a beautiful feeling. So, yeah, that's it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me, Brigitte. We've had such a lovely chat. I really appreciate you taking this time.
It's my pleasure.
I would recommend everyone look up Brigitte's music, but also if you've an interest in jazz singing, that she has her masterclasses and her teaching also, and look her up on her website, BrigitteBeraha.com. Thank you everyone for listening. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.